Welcome to this episode of The Gadfly and the People. I'm your host, Christopher James Curry, otherwise known as The Gadfly.
And I'm in a car!
You may be able to tell from the beautiful acoustics that we have, good sound that we have, but I'm in a car. I'm in my parents' van. I'm sitting in my driveway. I wanted to record this in the car because of the acoustics, but also I didn't want to be too loud in the house. My dad's trying to focus, and I had everything in here anyway, so I'm recording this in the car, and I think it's going all right. I've had to restart a few times, but we're gonna push through. I'm sorry, I took a little unexpected hiatus from the podcast, and that's partly because I've just been so busy, but also because I've been, it's mainly because I've been so busy. I've got school, I've got work, I'm applying to different jobs, I'm putting together the applications for that. What else am I doing? I'm looking for places to live with my fiance when we get married. Trying to figure all that out. I've been sick a few times. I think I'm still recovering from something. But anyways, here we are. We're recording episode 4, and let me tell you, it's going to be a good episode. At least for me, it's going to be a good episode. And I think you guys might enjoy it too, because we're changing, we're evolving. In order to address some of the concerns I have about putting out content frequently enough, we're going to shorten the episodes to like 30 minutes. And in doing so, it'll allow me to also focus on one topic and kind of do so in depth. And it'll allow me to cut down on editing time, and I'll be able to get things out more frequently. So that's what we're going to do. Once we get to doing interviews, which the interviews are coming, I promise you, we are going to be doing interviews at some point. I just need time to interview people, and I need equipment to interview people, and I don't have either one of those. So I'm doing solo right now. The phone calls will have to suffice. So, we're shortening the episodes. We're going single topic. We're going in depth on the topic. And my buddy Jonathan told me that I should do it this way because, one, it's more entertaining, he thinks. And he's the only local supporter, so he has some say on how this goes. But also, I think he said it would be good for me to kind of lean into what I know. And that's philosophy, so you guys might not like that, but I'll explain that in a minute. But to kind of lean into what I know would be a good thing. It'll make it easier for me. So, to kind of, I'm not quite sure how this is going to look, because I'd like to lean into the philosophy side of things, and there are kind of a few reasons why I want to do so. One, because it works with the name. Two, because it helps me study the things that are interesting to me, and it also helps me kind of let's back up. I'm applying for a lot of teaching positions, and two of the teaching positions that I have interviews for would be, for one of them for sure, and the other one is possible, or maybe probable, that I would be teaching philosophy in some capacity. And that's exciting to me because it's something I've been wanting to do for a while, but also it allows me to do what I want to do. And this, if I, is somebody coming home? Is that Andrew? Anyways, if I do philosophy on the podcast, it kind of helps me, test out, see where are those areas that I'm strong, where are those areas that I'm weak, and kind of help me put together like a little lesson plan or a syllabus of some sorts. So that'll be cool. So today we're starting with, we're gonna lean into the philosophy today, at least. We'll see how things go. And maybe it'll become like a little segment that I do. But I'd like to also talk about other things. I especially want to get other people to talk about other things. I'd like to talk to an astrophysicist about, space. And I'd like to talk about a mathematician about quantum, mathematics or whatever. I'd like to get scientists to come on and talk about science. I'd like to get historians to come on and talk about history. Cool stuff like that. So that's what we're doing. And today, because it's my podcast, I get to decide what we do, and we're starting with the origin of philosophy. And I'm kind of taking a little bit from what we did recently at an event at Aquinas, but I think it went well. So I think this is going to help me kind of feel better about how that went, because it went all right. I think I could have been better, but it went all right, and this will help me kind of move past that. So we're starting with the origin of philosophy. I think I've said that like 3 times now, but we're actually going to start. The origin of philosophy. Now, I'm not doing that I'm not doing the origin of philosophy in a kind of historical sense. I'm not starting with the first pre-Socratic and talking about what he talked about and then moving to the next one. No. I'm talking about the origin of philosophy as a sort of phenomenon or experience that we have in the human endeavor, in the human experience. And so maybe this is interesting, maybe it isn't. I think it's interesting. But I think you might too, because it might help answer the question, why the hell would somebody waste 4 years of their life or 8 years of their life or 12 years of their life studying and then teaching philosophy? Why the hell would anybody do that? What purpose does studying philosophy do? I mean, the big joke is that philosophers never make any money. There's kind of a point to that, but anyways. Let's start. Philosophy comes from 2 Greek words. Philos, which is the Greek word to love, and Sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom. So literally translated, philosophy means the love of wisdom, or to love wisdom. And I forget who it was. Somebody said, you are a wise man. I don't know who it was. I forget. Herodotus? I don't know. Somebody called somebody wise, and he was like, I'm not wise. Don't call me wise. Call me a lover of wisdom. Maybe it was Socrates. Was it in the Apology? I don't know. Anyways, philosophy is about loving wisdom. And we're going to talk about what wisdom is today. And kind of later on. And I guess it's generally accepted that what it means to love wisdom is to kind of study the nature of things. And kind of the principles of the world around us. That's what it means to love wisdom. I think that's generally accepted in the tradition. If you put any, 3 philosophers or 10 philosophers in a room, you ask them which area of study is the best, they'll say philosophy. But if you ask them what philosophy is, absolutely none of them will agree. But I think it can be generally accepted that, philosophy is kind of the study of the nature of things and the principles of the world around us. It's the love of wisdom. Why are things... It seeks to answer the question, why are things the way that they are? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is the grass green? Why is the sky blue? So, I'd like to start by doing a kind of exercise, a kind of reflection that you guys can kind of join with me. I don't know if it's a reflection. Some sort of exercise. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Minecraft. My brother just got home. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Minecraft, but basically, Minecraft works is that you start a world, and you get plopped into this world with nothing in your hands. No direct, it's not like there's a prompt telling you to do this or to do that. You kind of have like a freedom to move in and around. And you can kind of go any one of a multitude of directions. And, the first thing that you might be like is, what do you do? Like, what are you supposed to do? What do you notice? What's around you? Where do you even start in this world that you just got plopped into? Now, the natural order of actions that most players will follow, and I guess the way that the game is designed as well, is that you would try to find some sort of shelter. You try to find protection from danger, and a place to sleep. Then you find some food, okay? Then you gather some resources to make finding food easier. Maybe you build a house or something like that. And after you do all that, then you can start making tools and better structures and better houses And you get materials to, get food easier or to get materials easier. And once you do that, then you kind of don't stop there. There's some curiosity and creativity design along with it, and kind of designed into the game. Then you enchant those tools, and so that they last longer and to get you more stuff. And then you can build railways to kind of travel farther, and you can find a horse to travel faster. You can get a boat to travel across the sea. And then ultimately you can start exploring different dimensions. You can explore the nether and defeat the nether, and you can explore the end and defeat the end. But ultimately, like, the point, the why when it comes to Minecraft is ultimately about survival. There's no, you don't read a book in Minecraft. You don't, ask why the cow is brown and yellow or brown and white. You don't do that. And that's why it's kind of different than the human experience. In Minecraft, the experience is just about how to make survival easier. But the human endeavor, the human experience, is a little bit different than that. I mean, it has that. It follows kind of a similar path. First, we have to seek survival. We have to get our bare necessities: food, shelter, rest. We improve on those necessities. We've developed agriculture. We've developed tools. We've developed medicine. But once we have kind of all those necessities met, we're left with this kind of free time to think beyond survival. We have leisure. We have boredom, is what we have. I mean, I can't help but think, like, one time I was listening to this lecture on this topic, and the professor asked, if you didn't have to study, if you didn't have to work, if you had all your financial provisions taken care of, if you had all of your food taken care of, and your kids were okay, and all this kind of stuff, what would you do with your time? A lot of people said that they would go to school. He was like, okay, would you study what you're studying right now? A lot of them said, yeah. Some of them changed. The point that I'm making here is that leisure affords us something quite unique. Something that's different than what animals simply have. Because animals are very smart. Animals go out and they get food and they survive or they die. Some of them, I think there are some ants in South America that put together, they have something that resembles kind of agriculture. Beavers build dams. Birds build nests. So, what do animals do when they have all of their provisions met and some time on their hands? They don't really do anything. They're not left wondering, gazing at the stars, asking where their place in the world is. Humans are a little bit different. That's what we do. I think that's also why we're going to get into... Actually, I'm going to get into that later. So, we try to survive, then we improve, and then eventually when we improve enough, when we have met all of our necessities, when we have all of our basic needs met, we have leisure. And in leisure, we can think beyond survival. We have the freedom to be bored and then to wonder and to ask questions which really don't serve, any immediate purpose. They don't really serve the purpose of survival. We sit and we ask, maybe, why is the grass green? Or why does this particular medicine work when I take it? Or why is there something rather than nothing? So, I'd like to kind of talk... Aristotle, in his Metaphysics, kind of starts with this. He recognizes this. He's like, well, we have this time on our hands. What do we do with it? So, in Aristotle's Metaphysics, he begins by making kind of a generally accepted claim, I would say. You can, refute this if you'd like. But it's kind of a generally accepted claim, I would say. He starts by saying, all men by nature desire to know. And every time I read this, I keep thinking in my head the old adage that ignorance is bliss. And maybe ignorance is bliss, and maybe knowing is pain. Existence is pain, apparently. Maybe knowing is pain. New bumper sticker idea. But, anyways, all men by nature desire to know. And this is kind of the first claim that he's making. And then he goes on and he says, an indication of this is the delight that we take in our senses. Now, it's not easy to see. It's not really easy to see. Well, for Helen Keller, bad joke. It's not easy to see the transition between delighting in our senses and philosophy, and the desire to know. What's the link between the two of them? Well, he goes on. An indication of this delight is an indication of this phenomenon that all men by nature desire to know is the delight we take in our senses. For even apart from their usefulness, he's talking about the senses' usefulness, the senses are loved for themselves. And above all other senses, the sense of light. So what he's basically getting at here is that, when we're left with time on our hands, we start to notice the things around us, and we start to kind of take joy in our senses and delight in it. That I can see the beautiful sunset, that I can play in the soft grass, that I can, gaze into the heavens and see the stars, kind of thing. That I can hear the birds chirping, that I can smell the flowers, kind of thing. That I can feel the bark on the tree. He's kind of like, we take delight in these things, and you can only really do so. You can only really take delight in these things if you have leisure. But he goes on, and he basically says that we have, in our boredom, we have this sort of sensation of things. We have a sort of, we have a sensation of things. And, from our senses, we can develop memories. So, for example, I'm walking along one day in my leisure, and I'm walking in the garden. And I see this red round thing in a tree, and I grab that, and I take a bite out of it. And I notice this red round thing tastes good, and it fills me. It satiates my hunger. So the next day, when I'm done with all of my duties and responsibilities, I go, and I take a walk again. And I find another one of those in the same tree, and I go, and I remember, this was really good, and I take another bite. And when I do this enough over time, I can form a kind of experience. A kind of singular experience that the apple satisfies me. Now, this single experience isn't, knowledge of, it's kind of just like an experiential knowledge. That when I eat this apple, it tastes good, and I like it, and it satiates my hunger. But what leisure and what boredom allow us to do is to look into why. Why does that apple satiate my hunger? Aristotle says, art arises when from many notions gained by experience, one universal judgment about a class of objects is produced. So, what's he talking about art? What's he talking about experience and universals? Basically, what he's saying here is that the Greek word here for art is techne. We're not going to get into the language stuff. I think that's beyond, the scope of this podcast. Or at least this episode. But the Greek word that he uses there is techne, which better translated is a kind of technical science or practical science. But it's also art is a way that you can translate it. And I don't necessarily know if I like it, but yeah, whatever. For the sake of the podcast, we're going to continue with it. So, from the experience that we have, we can gain, or we can form a kind of universal judgment, a kind of statement about a class of objects, or a things of objects. When I have enough experiences of the apple satiating my hunger and tasting good, I can say, that apple tastes good. Another example of this, a kind of more baseline example of this, is the craftsman or the construction worker who knows that he has to put a particular nail and use a particular nail for a certain job. And he does this by experience. Maybe the journeyman tells him on his first day, when they're making the house, this is the nail that we're going to use for this job. And he's been using that nail ever since. And, maybe he doesn't know why he uses the nail, but the engineer who's in charge of the job knows why the nail is best. And so there's a little bit of a difference here. Oh, I'm getting a call. What's up? No, I'm in my car. Yeah, what's up?
Why are you in your car?
I'm recording an episode in the car.
Okay, well, when you're done, you want to play FIFA?
I can't.
Why not?
Because it's
Can you
Lent.
do it if you want?
Yeah.
Well, I gave up Xbox, but with the exception for you and I to play FIFA. Shucks.
Well, I don't know. I'll think about it and I'll let you know.
Okay, bye.
All right, I'll bye. So, okay, where was I? I'm sorry for the interruption. So, okay. Now there's this movement between, a movement from experience to a kind of practical knowledge, But then Aristotle goes further and he says that there's a movement from this practical knowledge to theoretical knowledge. And that there's a difference between knowing that the apple satiates and knowing why it satiates. Those are two different questions. Knowing that iron is better for a pickaxe than wood is a point of experience. But knowing why the iron is stronger than wood is what he calls wisdom. And so there's a kind of technical, practical wisdom, and then there's a theoretical wisdom that he's going to make distinction between. So practical knowledge we can think of as being like knowing something for the sake of something else. Okay? I know that I need, what's an example? Like going back to the construction example, knowing that you need a certain kind of crossbeam when building a house is a kind of practical knowledge. You know that not for the sake of knowing it itself, but you know it for the sake of some other good that's achieved in building the house. Knowing, how to build a bridge, you don't know it for the sake of building the bridge, but you know it so that you can get across the bridge. Knowing why you're using, some type of fertilizer when you're, planting your crops is for the sake of having healthy crops. But theoretical knowledge is a little bit different because it doesn't really serve any sort of immediate purpose or value with respect to like survival or progression in securing survival. Now, the key example that I think has always been used with me and I think kind of works is the example of knowing how an eclipse works. Back, I think it was the 6th century BC, Thales, however you say his name. I think Thales is probably the best way. Thales, basically, he predicts that there's going to be an eclipse. Because he knows how an eclipse works, and nobody else knows how an eclipse works. So he predicts that there's going to be an eclipse, and he makes a little bit of money off of it, and then he goes and he buys, I think it was an olive garden or something like that. Not an Olive Garden, they didn't have the restaurant chain back then, but he bought like an Olive Garden. But while many will say that could be like an example against it, I don't really think it works because back up. Slow down. Back up. Theoretical knowledge is different than... This is a kind of theoretical knowledge. Knowing how an eclipse works does not really serve any immediate purpose to taking care of your necessities. In fact, in order to figure out how an eclipse works, you need to have a surplus of time, a surplus of food, and all of your necessities basically met. Aristotle says that with a view to action, experience seems in no respect inferior to art, and men of experience succeed even better than those who have theory without experience. But theoretical knowledge, he says, goes further as it searches for the knowledge of the causes of things. The manual worker who builds the house knows how to build the house. And, the foreman knows what materials he's supposed to use. But the architect who's putting it together knows why certain materials are used and why certain structures are used. And this is different. The architect probably can't build the house. He doesn't have the practical knowledge of building the house himself and putting the nails into the wood. But he has the theoretical knowledge on why certain nails and why certain wood is used. And Aristotle then goes on and he says that, having this theoretical knowledge is considered to be more noble because he has knowledge of a cause. He has knowledge of a universal that others don't. And he can answer the questions that others can't. And this is kind of where science is born out of. I mean, if you think about it, it wasn't until, and Aristotle makes this note, that Egyptian priests didn't develop mathematics until they had time to study mathematics. When Egypt had enough bread, because they irrigated water to their towns or whatever, to their cities. When they had enough bread, then they had all this time on their hands, and they had these priests who had all this time on their hands. So they're like, okay, you guys are going to figure out mathematics. And philosophy and science emerge. This is where philosophy and science and the pursuit of knowledge emerges from. Not from necessity, but from curiosity and wonder, which are found in leisure. The sciences, which Aristotle states that the sciences which do not aim at giving pleasure or at the necessities of life were discovered first in the places where men first began to have leisure. So, why then do we pursue joy in this leisure? Because there's a lot of different things that we can do in our leisure. In our leisure, we could pursue pleasure. We could pursue better ways of survival, maybe. We can pursue, I think that's really, we could pursue nothing, which is, I think, what we do now. But anyways, the reason why we pursue knowledge is because there's a joy in understanding those things beyond mere survival. And I'm sorry for any of you that haven't quite had this in your life, but there really is a kind of joy that you experience when you come to know and understand something. When you can kind of feel that moment in your mind when, you don't feel it literally like you feel, your hand on a table, but you feel it in your mind when you're moving from this point of ignorance to understanding. Discovering why the moon covers the sun during an eclipse, for example, gives us a different satisfaction than just knowing that it happens. Aristotle states that we also think the master workers in each craft are wiser than the manual workers because they know the causes that things are done. So basically, what Aristotle is saying is that, knowing that to use one nail is good, knowing why to use that nail is better, but knowing why to use that nail in that place with respect to the greater scheme of things is best, is what he's saying. And in a game like Minecraft, which has limits, you can explore every biome and defeat the Ender Dragon, but you eventually run out of things to do in the game. And that's why people get bored and then they go find a new game. But that's not really what life is like. In real life, the search for wisdom never really ends. There's always a kind of there's another question, there's another mystery, there's another puzzle, an aporia to be solved. And this is why philosophy exists. we're not satisfied with just knowing that things work. We're not satisfied in just knowing that we're surviving. We're not satisfied in just surviving. Because when we have time on our hands and we have something to do, or we have nothing to do, we want to know why things work. And this is because we have a natural, innate desire in us. This is why Aristotle says all men by nature desire to know, is what he says. This isn't revolutionary, what he's saying. He's simply just pointing out a fact. We experience this, that we like to know things. Just look, for example, at the delight that we take in our senses. And from these senses, we have memory and experience, and then we have a sort of technical or practical understanding of these experiences, and then we come to know the why, or the cause of things. Why things are a certain way, why things make themselves to be, or why things manifest themselves in a certain way. And so I guess general questions that I came up with for myself, because I don't, I can't poll the people right now. Are you convinced by this distinction that Aristotle makes between wisdom and experience? Does it still hold today? Because I think that most people, if you go out on the street and you ask most people, what do you consider a wise man? A lot of them will say, well, the wise man is, he knows a lot of stuff, and, yeah. But, I don't know. I don't know if it still holds today, at least amongst the common view of the people, if this distinction works. Because I think in the modern period with, hypermaterialism and empiricism, I think those kind of have ruined things, but that's besides the point. I do want to, I don't want you to go and think that you're wasting your life away by being a CPA or a factory worker or a construction worker or a nurse or anything like that. No. Practical knowledge is, I guess, supremely valued nowadays. But it's only that way because we don't really have leisure, or at least we don't think we have leisure. Okay, so let's talk about, do we really have leisure nowadays? I guess that might be the next podcast episode, or I can make a quick note about it now. What do I want to do? Let's talk about it now. I have time. So what is leisure? What is this leisure that Aristotle's talking about? Well, I mentioned earlier that it's when you kind of have like a surplus of food and you have time on your hands. All of your basic necessities are taken care of. Okay, back then it was probably like that. People genuinely had nothing to do, so that's why they wrote plays and stories and read poetry and read books and, went out into the market. And that's why he was able to go out into nature and study animals and things of this nature. But nowadays, it doesn't seem like everybody seems like they don't have enough time for anything. And I wonder why that is. Oh, is my other brother just got home. I think the reason being is that we've found a way to fill our time, our true leisure, with nothing. We actually fill it with nothing. I mean, I can't remember, well, I can't remember any of the TikToks or the reels that I've watched. But I can remember all the times that I did. And I didn't do anything with that time. And I think that that's what most people are doing nowadays. We're not doing anything on our Saturdays and our Sundays anymore. We're not pursuing anything. So I guess I'm sure all of you have some free time throughout the day. What would you do if you had this free time? Would you waste your time listening to me? Or would you go find something cool to study? A good question to ask. If survival for you was guaranteed, if all of your necessities were met, would you scroll on the TikTok all day? I hope not. So today we talked about quick wrap up. Let's try to wrap up. Let's try to contextualize everything. Why am I going the philosophy route? Well, because engaging in this pursuit of theoretical knowledge is most rewarding. To know why is most rewarding for me. And I'd like to share that. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. And this movement from knowing how to survive to how to flourish, and then how to truly come to know the nature and the causes of things is one thing. It's a phenomena that happens, or a phenomenon that happens. And I guess next time, I think this kind of gives us a cool way to segue into the next episode. Dr. Dre. Next episode. Today we talked about why philosophy happens. Tomorrow we're going to talk about, or not tomorrow, next time we're going to talk about how philosophy happens. How exactly do we move from this point of departure that we have? We have free time on our hands now. How ought we to spend it? What's the way that we do so? We know that we do so. How do we do so? What's the movement from ignorance and then to sensation and then to memory and then to experience and then to art and then to practical wisdom? Well, art is practical wisdom, and then to theoretical knowledge. How do we do that? That's what we're going to get into. So how long have I been going here? 37 minutes. We've done well. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did this make sense? Am I crazy? Maybe I'll have to put on some sort of diagram or something on the YouTube for you guys who are listening or watching on the YouTube. So thank you. We'll figure it out. We're evolving. We're moving. We're changing direction. We're charting new waters. And I hope that you'll stick with me for the ride, for the journey. I'll be back hopefully next week. I miss you. I love you. I need you. Gadfly and the people out.